Barcelona DC.
Coming out in 16 languages now, which is something I never imagined. So it's all wonderful. I mean, it feels unbelievable. Actually, 2 years ago, I didn't even know that international festivals existed or that you could sell your book into other countries. I actually didn't even know it was possible. My father asked me to come spend a year back in Alaska with him, and I said no. And soon after that is when he killed himself. And so I felt really guilty. You know, I felt like if I had said yes to this trip, maybe my father would still be alive. So Sukkwan Island is the boy saying yes and spending the year with his father. And I didn't realize that when I was writing it. It wasn't until later, you know, it's all been unconscious, and then I find out later what the whole thing means, you know, what it's all about. Sukkwan Island is a place I've never seen. I've never been there. It's 50 miles away from Ketchikan, where I grew up, where I have my first childhood memories. So I know the forest, I know the water, I know what it would look like, but I've never been there. I wanted to move the story to a place I'd never seen, so that the story could take its own shape and would be very paranoid and cohesive. Everything would connect and mean something instead of just being the way it really is on some island that I've seen. So I moved it to a place I'd never seen. In the end, I really don't understand why, at that moment when he had a pistol to his head, why didn't he decide not to do it? Why didn't he see that his life could become something else, could reshape and become some other thing? So I don't really understand, and I wish that it had been enough that we loved him. I wish that had been enough for him to stay, and so I don't really understand it. I mean, I understand how he was suffering, and that he wasn't thinking clearly, and all the pressures, the patterns in his life that had come together. I understand all those that make suicide possible, but they don't make it inevitable. He still could have chosen not to. Finally, I think we care about a book because the characters are there, and the characters have problems. You know, the father is despairing and has problems, and the boy is having to take care of him, and that feels very wrong, that the boy is having to take care of the father. And I think as readers, that's what we identify with. But for me, in writing it, I focused mostly on the landscape, and it was through the landscape that I found who the characters were. For those 10 years that I was working on it, I was trying to understand my father and get closer to his despair and his suicide, trying to understand why it happened. And I had to throw away everything from the first 3 or 4 years of writing because of that. It was too close emotionally. I'd write about the day we found out he died and everyone's running around crying, and it's not something that you can read. So I had to throw all that away. And so what I kept in Sukkwan Island is actually at the end of the 10-year period, and I wrote it very quickly. I wrote it, half of it, in 17 days, sailing from California to Hawaii, my first trip sailing offshore. And I had my laptop velcroed to my knees. I was going back and forth in the waves, writing, and it was this rush, you know, this very fast moment. So it took 10 years to figure out how to write about him, but the book, what's kept there, it actually came very quickly. And I was reading novels by Cormac McCarthy and Faulkner when I was doing it also, so I was influenced by them. His book, The Road, is maybe more similar to Sukkwan Island, but it actually didn't exist at that point, because I wrote this a long time ago, you know. For 12 years I couldn't get it published. But yeah, what I love about Cormac McCarthy is that he extends his landscapes to figurative landscapes. So he'll write about mountains, a mountain range, but he says that their geology is not stone but fear. And it's that extension from the stone to the fear where the literal landscapes become figurative landscapes. And that, to me, is what's really interesting in writing. Because if I focus on the Alaskan landscape and I write about it, the unconscious starts to pattern the story and starts to make shapes that weren't my ideas and weren't my plans. So there's a huge surprise halfway through Sukkwan Island, which I didn't see coming. I had no idea it was going to happen. And that was the first time I really understood that writing's unconscious, that it's not our ideas and our plans. It's instead this shaping that we didn't expect. And it only happens if we focus on place, on the landscape, and just describe that landscape, and then it shifts and changes shapes and tells us about who the characters are. I don't feel guilty anymore. I had insomnia for 15 years. I couldn't sleep. I got over that. For 3 years afterward, I told everyone he died of cancer because I was ashamed, and that went away. I was really angry for a long time, and that was the last to go, actually, and that's only maybe 5 years or so that I haven't felt really angry at him. And it's because I've gotten old enough that I've failed in my own life, and I'm more sympathetic now. So I don't think I'm obsessed anymore with trying to understand. I understand that I'll never understand, and that I understand enough. You know, I've gotten close enough to try to understand, and all of the bad legacies have gone away. The worst was for 20 years, I felt doomed to repeat what he had done. I felt that someday I would hit a low point in my life and I would kill myself like he did. It would just be waiting for me there. And it was really like doom, like something you can't run away from. That at some point when you hit a low point, it's going to be there waiting. And I hit a low point in my life and realized that I hadn't thought at all about it. It hadn't even occurred to me. And so I realized that I wasn't going to kill myself ever, and felt free of that finally. So that was the worst part of the legacy. Well, my big problem was always money, actually. I always knew that I wanted to write, but I could never make any money at writing, so I had to have these other jobs. And I've had a lot of crappy jobs. But when I couldn't get the book published, I went to sea and became a captain, and I liked that. I ran charters in Turkey and Mexico and the Caribbean, and that was fun. And then more recently, I've been a teacher. I'm a professor at University of San Francisco, and that's a really nice job. I mean, if you have to have a second job, it's really nice to go to a classroom with students and talk about great books, and it's just 2 evenings a week. So it's great. I feel very lucky.
And I'm really proud having you as a teacher.
Well, I think it's a limited pride, but it's fun. I really enjoy the classroom. It's great, and their work is really good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.